No.
I was telling Jamie earlier that after we recorded the first one,
Yeah.
I was listening to an audiobook literally the day after, where this woman who is a world kind of renowned academic in the philosophy world was pronouncing Descartes.
Descartes.
I was devastated.
Like he was a Yorkshireman.
Well, no, she was giving it the accent and everything, you know what I mean? So it was pretty cool, but I thought, but maybe she's wrong. That's the thing.
Perhaps she's watched our video and she's going, oh no, I've shown myself right up in that audiobook.
That's what she's doing. Absolutely. So that got me thinking. That got me thinking what our existential philosopher names would be if we were like existential philosophizing in the 50s. So mine's dead easy because Mordieu is in fact French in origin as a name, and it means to nibble. so I'd be if I'd nibble on what you want. So my philosophy, my existential philosopher name would be Steven Mordieu. See, and then gets better. So Jamie's has a bit of a kind of Austrian, Hungarian, German kind of feel to it, because he would be Jimmy Scorreur. You know, you've got a kind of Scorreur kind of thing.
I couldn't even say that.
And yours is the best because yours is Georges Boulier.
Yeah.
See, I mean that's a proper French existentialist philosopher name, that Georges Boulier. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Love it. You don't look that impressed, George, to be fair.
He's like, what's this fella rabbiting on about?
Have you got beer, George?
I'm going to get a whiskey in a second.
Yeah.
It's called Beers and Ideas, George.
I didn't know
I know, but it's been a slow-moving nightmare today.
Oh, good enough.
What snacks have you got? Jamie's on the olives, pickled onions, and tomatoes. It was going so well, wasn't it? Oh, you're on the pizza. Tell you what.
Steven, what you want?
Me?
Yeah.
I've had me tea, because I call it tea because I'm common.
Yeah.
So I've had me tea.
It was 2 seconds. I'm going to pour myself a drink. I'll be back with you.
All right. Okay. Right.
George.
Okay.
Right. Good. Okay. So last week we discussed Jamie's brilliant concept of Descartes and his apples in the barrel. How I have to examine. Can't just examine one. You got to examine them all. So this week it's my turn, and I'm going to introduce a very simple concept from a very difficult philosopher. So Ludwig Wittgenstein, it's his concept of the lion. So very simply, his proposition is, if a lion could speak perfect English, perfect grammar, perfect diction, we still would not be able to understand the lion, because everything the lion would say about its reality entirely comes from the existence of a lion. So the Serengeti, hunting like a lion, the wants and desires of a lion. So we have no commonality with this lion. I'm sure Stephen and Jamie can already start thinking of how this links into social work and what we do as social workers. But I think before we get into the discussion, something I want to do is do a quick, I'm going to try and do in 60 seconds, biography of Ludwig Wittgenstein. Okay, so born 1880s in an extremely wealthy Austrian family, one of the most wealthy families at the time. He was the least favoured child of his father and mother. The rest were more brilliant than him. But even as a child, he built machines. Anyone else would see them as a genius. Brahms wasn't allowed to play the piano because he wasn't good enough pianist in the house. They're just absolutely ridiculously sort of talented family. All his brothers killed themselves. He would have. His mom slept with carbolic acid on her feet. Loads of bizarro stories. He decided to go to Manchester to study to be an aeronaut, where he developed a sort of prototype of the jet engine. But doing that, he got interested in mathematics, and this led him to think about the philosophy of mathematics. So in typical philosopher sort of biography style, instead of just reading books on it, he drove straight down to Cambridge University and banged on Bertrand Russell's door. What he would have done with his philosophy if the First World War hadn't gotten in the way, who would have known? He fought for Austria against the British in the First World War. Very brave fella. He took on machine gun fire, saved his colleagues, blah, blah, blah. All the while writing philosophy on the Russian front. It's absolutely insane. Give away all his wealth. Left philosophy, designed houses, built radiators that went in the corners. Just absolute bizarre lifestyle. Then towards the end, the link to the Northeast, he worked in the RVI as a porter, pushing burns victims around, but at the same time he developed techniques to deal with burns and mathematics around that. Very complicated philosopher. His main stick, what we're going to talk about today, is the philosophy of language. And one of the first, he's basically two philosophers, so the early Wittgenstein and the late Wittgenstein. So the first guy talks about the limits of my language are the limits of my world. And basically a lot of philosophy got into basically a problem of language. So if we scatter those pack of cards away, there's not much left. That's his basic contention. And he went to primary school with Adolf Hitler as well. That's another little fact. Anyway, so there you go. That's his little biography. So how I think this relates to social work is this. Basically, in the simplest sense, and I would love to see what you guys think of this, we as social workers, in some method, normally written or by verbal account, have to give the story, sort of experiences of another person. We only work with people, and it's our job to present to somebody else that person's experiences. So everything we write, every analysis we do is basically trying to jump that divide. Would you agree so far, guys, or am I a stretch too far?
No.
Okay. So what Wittgenstein's contention is, since you're not the person with dementia, Jamie, living in his circumstances, you can never really get to a true sense of understanding. You just fumble around in the dark. And one thing I thought, and this is probably true of children's social care, is if we go back to day one with the case, say the police have been out to a house and there's been domestic violence. A policeman writes a report of what he's seen happening the next day. So he types up the words of what he's seen happening. Those words go to the social worker, who then types another set of words based on those words. Another social worker goes out to meet the family, has never seen exactly what happened, and types another set of words. Then say the family goes wrong, they might get a independent reviewing officer, more words, more expressions, often harken back to this date. You go to court, judges, lawyers, all have this language battle about nothing they've ever seen. So no judge has seen anyone parent. The solicitors have never seen anyone parent, but this is how our world of decisions are made through this language game. This is sort of, this would be Wittgenstein's sort of analysis of social work and how it's sort of framed. And it's quite stark when you put it this way. And I don't think anything I've said is wrong. We're obviously striving to do the best we can, but this language game, I don't know how we can get out of. Guys, what do you think of that so far?
I think it's very accurate. It links into what we're talking about last time. You know, we had a conversation regarding Black Lives Matter and how that meant something different for every individual person. So we had lots of people arguing different viewpoints. They all thought they were arguing the same viewpoints, but all arguing different ones because it meant something different to them. It's that social constructionism, isn't it? Is that we construct the language. I think that's what he's saying, you're saying, George, is that we construct this language and then all we're trying to do is interpret it. And we can't because it's the lying thing. We are not that lion. I'm not that person with dementia. We can only have a good guess at best,
Yeah.
based on work experience and more knowledge of social workers, of what that line is experiencing, or what what that family's experiencing. So I think it fits into social work extremely well. What's your thoughts, Stephen?
Well, I think listening to the air, we only ever see the kind of external presentation, don't we? We only ever hear the words that they're speaking, but we never, I don't feel we ever kind of get to understand the context that that person's coming from. I suppose that's kind of what's being said here.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think it's because often the thing that always worries me is I work with older people as a social worker. So I'm working with people in their 80s, and I see them for a few hours to somehow, and that few hours and what I write, the words that I write, shapes the next steps of their lives when they've got kind of 80 plus kind of years behind them. And we never really get at, I suppose we get at the context of the person because we find out, I don't know, that they worked in the shipyards and they were married and they had 2 children. We get at the facts of that, but we never really get at what it means to them. So when they say things to us, we just interpret them from our own experience rather than from their experience, because we can never truly understand how they factor all of those elements into the words that they then present to us.
Yeah, and I think we add things, we bring things to the conversation unintentionally. So they might tell us, our 3 kids. I was a family man. We don't know that, but he hate his kids. What a burden and a financial drain they are his entire life. But we automatically bring something to it that we've added, that nobody else has added. We've done that. Or somebody fought in the war. Oh, he's a war hero. No, he was conscripted. He had no choice, no matter how he hated the thing. But there's no hero. He hid when he was there. I'm not saying that he's still not a hero. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying we bring our own concepts to that dialogue with that personal work, and we bring it in. And they haven't brought that in. We add bits to the story, don't we, based on our experience, our expectations. And I don't think we can get away from that. I think we have to accept that that's just the way, as human beings, we operate. We add some massive culture, isn't it? We think, oh, this is what that means, because we don't have the time to explore every single little thing. Or should we? Is that what we're saying?
I think it's a good point, Jamie. And I think to go back to Wittgenstein, he gives an example of the simplest language game possible. And it's very interesting. We use this example all the time about the bricklayer. So I'm the head bricklayer and I'm up the ladder. I'm going to talk to the guy below to pass me a brick. I will point to a brick, pass me the brick. We've both got a shared experience of what a brick is. So the lad down below knows what to pass up to me. We'll both agree it's a brick. That's the basic language game. Wittgenstein would say both participants are at the same level. He's not going to pass a banana. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to be that line problem. It's linear. The brick goes up. Do you know what I mean? You could ask someone else. It's sorted. We're not playing a game like that at all. We're a million miles away from that. That's the sort of warning from this story. And I think one bit I would like to hear from you, Jamie, and this is the real area of your strength, is the language game around capacity, capability. With my world, it'd be good enough parenting or safeguarding, all these words that are defined by the law, but are completely not in the frame of reference of the person we're applying them to. Do you see what I mean? If I use 2 complicated words, so the laws to safeguard me, ideally, but I don't know what that word means. But the law asks you to use that word to judge me, but I can't play the game. Playing a game, I don't know the rules.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think a lot of social work, a lot of professionals and the public as well, really struggle with them with the difference between capability and mental capacity to make a decision. And I think it's a big problem. So we see time and time again, we see social workers who turn around and says, "Oh, I've assessed their capacity to manage their finances." For one, that's not a decision. But secondly, you haven't. When you look through what they've actually done, they might be quite proud that they bought a sort of folder full of fake money and asked them and done some tests for the person about what this fake money means and how much change should they have to buy that and all that kind of stuff. They haven't assessed the person's capacity to make a decision regarding how they manage their finances. What they've assessed is somebody's capability, and the law doesn't ask what to do that. The law asks what to assess somebody's capacity. Somebody's capability may be relevant, which it will be relevant, but it's not. It's something very, very different to assessing somebody's capacity. When I delivered some training to Northumbria Police, asked this question, and we had a big discussion regarding capacity and capability, and every single one of them. So when we're talking about it, they all come to the senses and said, I didn't realise that when we're talking about somebody's capacity, it's different to somebody's capability. They thought it was the same thing. And because in some ways you look at language, they are very similar things, aren't they? It's just when we're looking at a very specialised bit of knowledge, it's different. It's vastly different. But in language, somebody's capability and somebody's capacity, you could really kind of, it would take something to pull it apart. But in a legal sense, two a huge, massive different things.
Yeah. So, and my point is, that's the game. Exactly, that's the game that's playing in people's lives, hanging on this game that they can't access.
Yeah.
It's a Kafka nightmare, isn't it? I'm on trial, but I don't know what the charges are.
Yeah.
I don't know how to defend myself.
You know what the rules are.
Yeah.
What the rules are.
So I know, Stephen, you make this point about the mums on the family court? Everyone knows the words, or everyone's got the line. What was it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think I said this last time, which was kind of it's like we're all playing a card game, but the parents don't know what the rules are to the game. We know the rules, and they've got to somehow kind of play their best hand without actually kind of knowing kind of what the rules are of the game, And I think we do that all the time, and I think it's a couple of interesting points there, and one is the common sense use of language versus the kind of professional use of language. And I think we easily fall into talking in kind of professional jargon, even when we're desperately trying not to. And that disadvantages the kind of the service user or the parent or whatever in that situation. I remember, this is going back ages, this is when the General Social Care Council were our regulatory bodies. This is how long ago this example is. And I was working in Sunderland City Council at the time, and we were criticised because people hadn't realised that they were being assessed. And they were saying, so when you go out, you need to say to people, this is your assessment. And we were saying, well, actually, we think it's really good that they didn't know they were being assessed, because that's a technical kind of word that's laid down in law. We have to undertake an assessment. The fact they didn't know they were being assessed actually shows that as a social worker, we've done a really good job. Because it was just a conversation, and they ended up getting something from that conversation or whatever, some help or support or some services or whatever. But there was us kind of thinking we were doing the right thing and doing a good job, but now being told to use this kind of language that is professional language that other people just aren't going to understand. Or it's actually going to create a barrier. I'm assessing you. What's that mean?
And I think that's a really important point, isn't it? Because you can see from the extremes. So to the extremes where it's that language is being used, or other people haven't been told being assessed as quite abusive. So I say quite a lot of people doing mental capacity assessments on somebody, and the decision is whether they remain in their own home or they're going to a care home. They don't actually tell them that. So they have a general conversation with somebody, and the end of it conclude, or you're going to a care home. And that person hasn't a chance to kind of defend their position to be in their own home. So that's on one side, but yet we had a governing body who took that to the far end, really, and asked social workers to do that for everything, because I can think of a lot of good examples where I went out and had a general conversation with somebody and about and discovered what their needs are. If I use the word assessment in that situation, then it would have been things would have went pear shaped. So I think there's a difference, isn't it? Is when you use that language. So in the case of assessing somebody's mental capacity decision regarding if they're going to care home or not, certainly you would have to say that. You would have to say, this is what I'm here to do, and I need to know what your thoughts are. These are the risks, and I need to know this. This is this assessment. But if you're going to somebody who needs support, and you based on the peripheral assessment that you've done in the past, that that if you come informally, they're going to reject you. So you can have a general conversation with somebody and gather what their needs are and how best to meet their needs. So I think it's how you use that language, that line thing, George. You're going back to Wittgenstein. It's how do you do that? And that's a skill of the social worker, isn't it? It's to put the regulatory bodies aside and the advice aside. We're not automatons. We're not cogs in a wheel. We're thinking beings here. And when do we use the language in the right way? I think, and that's a skill of the social worker. I think that's what we should be teaching.
Yeah, and you think some of it is a point of philosophy, because going back to the bricklayer, pass me the brick. This is the brick, and I know Stephen's made this point before. This is good parenting right here, but it's never shown. The hand is never shown by the social worker. Like, you can't come in and show a capacitated person making a decision, really, can you, Jamie? You can't say, right, freeze frame, I'll show you what you need to do. Pass the capacity test. I can't even get the words out because it's quite a complicated concept, but you see what I mean? You can't say the equivalent of, there's the brick, pass me the brick. Yeah. This is how you need to parent in this instance right now. I'll show you how to do it. Wow. Go on, Jamie, you've probably got an example.
In that, I mean, and before lockdown, Stephen and I were looking at doing a research project doing exactly that. Is
brilliant.
And saying, this is the Mental Capacity Act, and this is how we assess if you've got capacity to make this decision or not, and can we actually deliver that level of education and training to the people who we are assessing, and would that improve their outcomes? Would that make them more autonomous? So actually removing that block, this is a professional what use, and this is what everyone needs to know. But COVID happened and I changed jobs, so whether we can pick, I hope some authority, maybe my previous authority will pick it up again, because we had a lot of my service manager was really keen for it to go ahead, and so was the university.
Or you could argue, plain devil's advocate, that by educating people in how to play the game, they then inadvertently place themselves at more risk, because they give us all the right answers and we go away satisfied we've done our job, because they've told us all the right things, they've said all the things they need to say. But actually, if they hadn't known how to play the game, then we would have got at the real kind of person. We would have got at the real answers rather than the answers. I mean, you must see this with some parents, though, who kind of have been part of the system for so long that they know the answers that you wanted to hear and could give those answers quite readily, because they know how the system works, because they figured it out.
I think there's two sides to that, Stephen. Would you also argue, I think it's a principle in my old career, accountancy, two reasonable accountants could come up with some very different accounts. So I could make a set of reasonable judgments based on accountancy rule book that says, oh, your cost of goods is worth this and your depreciation is that. All judgments that makes you in a bad financial sense. Then another reasonable accountant could make you look good. As a social worker, kids could be removed on the basis of forever adopted God, on the basis of these judgments. Two reasonable social workers could make very different. Well, if you're the manager, Stephen, I write your assessment. You don't see the people parenting. The actual thing I'm talking about is never seen. That's my main takeaway. The lion's experience.
Yeah.
You can't jump in the lion's head and say, let's go on the Serengeti.
And I suppose that with the parent example, you can't know whether the parents are just on the cusp of about the kind of their experience is such that they're about to get it right, whatever right is, whoever defines right. You don't know that, do you? You can't get into their kind of into their head to know just where they're at, and they might be just about to come good, but you're not going to know that because they never tell you, or you don't ask the question, or whatever. I suppose there's a book I've been reading recently which really criticises the concept of empathy, and whether empathy is a good barometer for us to use, whether we can ever actually understand what people are like, and whether by feeling people's emotions or by relating to people's emotions, does it actually help? And he uses the phrase cognitive empathy. We've just got to kind of think about their position. We can't live their experience because we haven't got all the backstory either, have we? That's the point. And I suppose that's the point that Wittgenstein makes it. We haven't got the backstory, so we don't know how they're formulating their views. Does he give us a solution to this naughty conundrum at all, or does he just say that's how it is and it's really tough?
So Wittgenstein's first opus, the Tractatus. If I get this wrong, guys, please put a message in. It famously ends with, anyone that's understood these set of words before you will understand that they're all meaningless. So he's laid out the full. It's basically revolutionized Western philosophy, and this ending statement is a bit like Socrates, Plato, know nothing sort of thing. Everything I've said is meaningless, and if you really understood it, you'll really understand that it's meaningless sort of thing. So there's no way out. Basically, he builds a ladder up, but then he kicks it back down.
So it's difficult, isn't it? Because it makes absolute sense what you've been saying, but where does that leave us if we can never understand the people that we're working with?
Well,
how do we help them?
There's two social workers. One that doesn't think there's a problem in trying to strive to understand the other person, and one that will make efforts to try and understand the other person and understand the difficulties in doing so. If you're number two rather than number one, again, the same as I said last week with Jamie's, I think you're doing a better job. You're trending towards a better job. Also our bricklayers, we can't build a perfect wall. It doesn't exist. We can only strive towards best intervention at that particular time. And whether that's 70%, 60%, it doesn't really matter. But that's striving.
So are we just trying to create an environment where the person brings themselves to that environment, and that environment is more supportive than the environment that they've created for themselves? Where kind of the person somehow forming some sort of bubble around them, so that they've got a better support network, maybe or something like that. They've got a better support network around them, so they can make steps forward for themselves. We can't make those steps on our because we don't know where they're at. I'm
just thinking, is it something a bit deeper? Is it the case of, I think what you're saying, but just going a little bit further with it, is it a case of, because we can't understand their narrative, we can try, and I think we should try, but those little things that we do get, we can use I think the point you're trying to make, Stephen, is we can use their strengths that we can find within them, or help them to find within themselves, to kind of get them out of a solution focused type of way. So I think the next acceptance that we don't need to understand the problem to some degree. You do, and you know the solution, but we're going to help you find it. And is this leading towards the solution focused therapy type of work? Just by what you said there, Stephen, that really kind of inspired me to think that. I don't know if it's right or wrong, or.
Well, I think one of the problems is that, and I would say this about myself. So this is not about service users or parents who are users of service. Sometimes you don't even know yourself what the impact of your history or the previous conversations. Sometimes you don't know for yourself what impact that's having. I can think back to things that have happened in my kind of 20s and 30s, and I'm only just now beginning to understand kind of those, and how things could have been different. Yet this position here seems to be saying that actually, as social workers, we can never access that.
Yeah.
But maybe the person can't even access that either. Maybe the words they use aren't reflective of their journey, because is it the guy that wrote *Sapiens*? Harari. He says that doesn't he says that you've got your objective position. You can see things, you can see what they are. You've got a subjective position. You feel emotions and you and all that kind of stuff. The rest of it are just stories that we tell ourselves. Constructions and stories. So if people are telling themselves stories all the time, if they can't see it, we've got a problem there, haven't we? Trying to support them and help them to see it for themselves.
But I can never pronounce this guy's with Wittgenstein's. Is that right?
Yeah, Wittgenstein.
Wittgenstein.
I think we've accepted that we don't. We can pronounce all of these things however we want to.
Someone easy next week.
Yeah.
Bob Smith.
It's yours, Stephen, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But he's put a blocker on that, hasn't he? Is that we can't understand it to any degree because we're not relying on it.
Oh yeah, he sees it entirely impossible. And the point I was going to make when I said to Stephen I was going to make a point is, I think as social workers we do not need to stretch to the nth understanding any particular theory, particularly philosophy. We're skilled at picking off the tree a reasonable concept and taking away something useful for us, something useful for our practice, and we might get shot down, or you didn't read them in the original German, so you don't really understand it, or any of this garbage. We've used it for something good in our profession. That's okay. And I think it's similar to this piece I'm writing that Stephen was going to have a look over. People scared of medical terms or scared of, like you say, capacity, the mental health terms. As social workers, we need to get past all that. We just need to try our best, pick what we need out of things, and understand enough to get by. Do you see what I mean, Jamie?
Yeah, I perfectly agree. I think we've got to kind of harness and hone in on that skill in social workers, isn't it? It's like we can't. I mean, we are more and more limited as time goes on, because of austerity. The time we have with the people we're working for is just been, it's been condensed. So the idea that we're going to actually, get to know somebody as much as we'll try in a very short period of time, it's not possible.
And maybe what this is telling us is that we can never fully know their internal monologue anyway. So we can only at best somehow manage how people are presenting to us and do something with that.
Yeah. So George, I would agree. Yeah.
100%. In the social work office, which is a place that has to be somewhat protected from criticism, how easily and succinctly do they sum people up with judgments?
Yeah.
You sat next to a children's team. How easily do they sum people up with one or two lines?
Oh, yeah.
That's them again. Blah 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 blah.
Bad parents. Yeah. We've heard it all before. We know the language that goes on and the judgments that are made, and it's very hard to kind of see past that and recognise, and going back to what you said at the whole beginning about the lines and about the language and stuff like that. But how do you? A good social worker sees past all that, don't they? They see past it all. But unfortunately, I think a lot of people get sucked into the system very, very quickly. As soon as they qualify, and that's the sad thing.
Right, guys, should we all pick one takeaway for social work practice? One snappy little takeaway. Stephen, do you want to start?
Oh yes, please, because then that makes it easier. Because then I can then nobody pinches my idea. I think it's just accept that you can never truly understand somebody's internal monologue. I think that's what that you have to work with what is presented to you.
Thanks, Stephen. My takeaway would be is to look at some of the models such as solution-focused therapy, which recognises that and gives a way forward through that. yeah, that we might take there. Yeah.
So I was thinking about this when we're talking. I've got one tiny little story, it'll not take long. Have either of you seen the Tony Slattery documentary?
No.
So Tony Slattery, comedian, Whose Line Anyway, famously developed psychosis and gone from the scene 30 years. This BBC program I recommend you watch it to understand about psychosis and all this guy. Anyway, so struggle to get a diagnosis, seeing different specialists. He's alcoholic, psychosis, back and forth. Anyway, so they just go up the chain of specialism, and eventually they go. I think they go to Dublin, all the way to the number one psychiatrist that deals with his particular psychosis is a dual diagnosis, Jamie, with alcohol and alcohol. Anyway, and the main skill that this person had, because the junior physician recommended her, the main skill that this person recommended, this senior, one of the most senior psychiatrists had in the UK, was that sometimes, I'm going to slow this phrase down, sometimes she has a turn of phrase that makes the difference. So she presents things in a way, she uses an analogy in a way that fires that person's mind. It's almost like she'll not learn that in medical school, she'll not learn that in the psychology handbook. Just put things a certain. Do you realise that you do? It's a bit like our hero Kim and Sue Berg. Put things a different way. So whilst we've got this mountain to climb, there may be this impossible mountain to climb with language. Language can also make a marathon this far.